Yeah, we're opening up a can of drama. Everyone get ready. Put the drama hats on.
I like how he says the views expressed in this article do not necessarily represent those of SHIRO Media Group. Let me just say for the record that the views of this article exactly represent SHIRO Media Group. I am 100% on board with this.
I got some differences, but I'm going to put on my drama hat so I can...
Okay.
This is the drama hat, the pink one.
Wow.
Actually, I'm gonna take that off. That actually hurts my head.
Pink on red. Now there's a color combination.
Yeah. So this is my drama hat. Drama hat. So this one's interesting. So for people that don't know, there's sellers on AliExpress that are actually selling Saturns, but it's in a weird configuration where they are ripping out the disk drive, removing like a bunch of components from the board and putting a power supply in there,
and
like a new power supply in a case.
Ditching the case.
Yeah, ditching the case, and then putting in this. I would say monstrosity. Would that be the nomenclature you'd use?
Top. Like it thinks it looks good. It thinks it looks good, but it doesn't.
I've actually seen this in person. A guy at the Gamescom had it. The buttons really suck and feel like they're 3D printed. Like. They are really bad. Like, I was not a fan of the buttons. The things that I was jealous because he showed me that it had a Soccer Wars one. I was like, oh yeah, but I don't remember how much the buttons sucked. The one cool thing I did like is the one with the screen on it. Like, I mean, I know that it's getting some hate, but I kind of like the idea of having a Saturn with the screen on and throwing it in the den. I do like that. Like, I think that one might be passable.
Is that like the screen that retro art, or what was it, retrobit at their booth, like they had like a little iPad screen connected to it, and I think it was just using like a Bitfunks or I don't know what.
I have no idea. I mean, more than likely it's probably just a ripped out screen from a touchpad.
Like I guess I wouldn't mind a good quality LCD screen on a Saturn so long it was like hooked up correctly, RGB with like proper scaling and low latency. But either way.
Real quick, what we're talking about here, Pandemonium wrote an editorial about these Saturn Minis that are being created and sold on AliExpress, and the whole point of his piece is to basically put it out there about how bad of an idea these are, both from the perspective of preserving the limited number of Saturn consoles that still exist in the world, and from the perspective of the end user, because they're a ripoff. They cost a ton of money. They cost way more money than it would cost for you to actually buy a Saturn yourself. Right. And even if you want to use a Saroo with it, buying a random Saturn off of eBay and a Saroo is still going to cost less than one of these crazy chopped up monstrosities.
Yeah, and I think the big
yeah, go ahead, Pat.
I would say, and the biggest thing about that is that you can only use a Saroo on these things. They apparently the Fenrir, I don't know if it could fit or not. I don't think they get that sorted in there. But the satiator, it's just weirdly enough the power supply replacement that comes with it suspiciously blocks off the Saturn video port. So you can actually not use a satiator inside of this thing, which is kind of.
And you can't open them up to put, without destroying the case probably, to put a Fenrir or a mode in there.
Yeah. Probably not, no, and you'd have to modify it.
Welcome to chat.
Yeah, get in the chat, James. I want to hear the.
Honestly,
if you can, get in the voice chat.
I think with the advent of FPGA and like Mr. Becoming so good and everything like that, I just don't think that there is a good enough reason
to do this.
So like James mentioned something I think that it's really important on Twitter or X, was that people make a huge stink about software video game preservation, but not so much about hardware preservation, and the thing is there's not an infinite amount of Saturns out there. It is a resource that is going to become slimmer and slimmer, with some of them ending up in landfills if they got thrown out, or if they weren't, or some just be, some needing to be recapped, and that doesn't happen unless folks are dedicated to doing that over time. I mean, you just know it's going to happen. But I mean, now that we're able to not just emulate but literally duplicate the entire chipset functions with FPGA, I think that you could easily you could make it slimmer and smaller with using FPGA in the next year or so, probably. So there's really no need to do this to the actual Saturn motherboard.
Honestly, I just want this case. I want the case and put a Mister in it. Like,
I don't even want the case. I think it's ugly. Honestly, you can't. The Saturn looks so sexy as it is. Why do people think that they can make it look better?
I don't want it for a Saturn. I want to put a Mister in it.
Oh, okay, fair
enough.
That's
just what I want to do. I want the Mister. I want the screen so I can have a portable Mister thing.
You should get one of those.
That'd be cool.
You should get one of those Best Hit Chronicle, like the tiny Saturn, and put a Mister in there.
Honestly, that might not be a bad option. I just like the screen thing, so I can, like, if there's a way I can get a kit where it's the whole setup. I don't know. I can never find a Mister case that makes me happy. They're either too expensive or sold out, so I can never find one. So that really depresses me. I just want a Mister with a case on it. Mine's been bare since 2018. Like, come on, somebody hook me up with this thing or get me a link to a good ass case, please. But anyway, sorry about that. I didn't mean to. That was an outburst that was uncalled for.
It's okay.
Sorry, I'm just really upset. I just want a case. It's been 7 years. Come on, guys, give me a good case.
What are your personal feelings on this? Like, where do you sit?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. I agree with what Nick has to say about this. I think that it's. I don't like that these Saturns are being chopped up. And like, it's not just. I mean, when it was just like TWM or TMWX, he's the Chinese modder who's worked on the Saroo and whatnot. When it was just him like doing this to a couple of Saturns for fun as like a personal project. They put a video on Twitter or whatever. Like, that's fine. Like, it's cool to see. But when people are like doing this a bunch and selling them, like, okay, now we're starting to eat in, seriously eat into the supply of the Saturns that are still out there. And even if you say, well, it's a Saturn that was broken already, so, whatever. Well, if what they do gets it to work in one of these setups, and it wasn't really broken in the first place, it could have been repaired somehow. So that argument doesn't really hold water. And yeah, if somebody, I mean, I guess if you really like how the case looks, you'd be willing to pay for it. But like, if you just want to play the Saturn on original hardware and you want to be able to put whatever games you want in ODE, and the cheapest option is Saroo, then you also probably want the cheapest option of getting the Saturn itself, which is not
original hardware, right? You said it yourself, original hardware. This is not original. This is less than it was.
Right. It's not even originally hardware anyway, right?
Yeah, just get a Japanese,
it originally was part of hardware.
Saturn, and get a Saturn with a burnt out laser and just pop a Saroo in there. If you want to, if you want to do the Saroo
Papa Giorgio,
thing,
baby.
It's like I mean, there's a whole other conversation about like whether Saroo is a good idea or not, but that I say, like, for a bunch of folks out there who literally just want to play the commercial library and they're like, they don't care and they just want to buy the cheapest thing, sure, pop a Saroo into an old broken down Saturn and you got real hardware and you're playing a real Saturn, but like this is it's just silly. I've never been a fan of this kind of stuff, and I went on record also, I do not like the slim mods that they do on like Dreamcast too. Like, oh, let's
to be fair though, those are just cases though. That's the thing, is I don't mind those.
Well, they're taking everything and putting it into like the size of what, like pressing it into the size of like an Apple TV. It doesn't look better. It's not better for cooling, certainly.
Yeah.
Like, it's literally every side of that is worse than what you had, which was one of the most perfect console designs, in my opinion, the Dreamcast.
One thing I want to point out with this, one argument I keep seeing people say is they're like, oh, these are junk Saturns. They were going to go in the trash anyways. No one wanted them. People need to realize that Japanese sellers on Yahoo Auctions and eBay, when they list something as junk, it doesn't mean what the rest of us in like the US think of as junk.
Sure.
It, like, majority of the time, it literally just means this is used and I have no means to test it.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally all it means.
A different standard.
Many cases, like a junk Saturn that you buy on Yahoo Auctions would be seen as like grade A, like perfect on American eBay.
Offer up or eBay, yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, to give you an example, I bought a Japanese 3DO FZ1 on Yahoo Auctions about 6 months ago, and it was pristine in box, and I got it for like $100. It was listed as junk. It works. It's fine
because they have different standards. But even if you do, like counterpoint, even if you do buy a quote unquote US junk Saturn and the CD, the CD drive doesn't work,
right?
And you're what, 20 to 40 bucks in? Either way, there's no good reason to do this.
I bought my brother an American Saturn on eBay last year. It was like $30 because it was again untested, and the guy said he thought the disk drive didn't work. The motor was seized on the disk drive. I was able to buy like a refurbished disk drive from a guy on eBay that just refurbishes old hardware for like $20, popped it in. So for $50 had a perfect working Saturn that I gave my brother for his birthday.
Yeah,
I was able to get him a satiator to put in it. It's like
I mean, look,
there's really no point to buying these slim systems. They just don't make any logical sense.
And to anybody who does want one or has bought one, I'm not throwing you under the bus or saying you should be ashamed of yourself. Really, it's more like the person who's making them, who's cutting up all these Saturns.
Yeah, we're talking about like the problem en masse.
That's where it becomes a huge problem. But I mean, the folks buying it are definitely adding to.
I think the main issue is like that people need to be making an informed decision on these and realize what they're getting. Because I've seen so many people like out there saying like, "Oh, this is a brand new Saturn. It's new Saturn hardware." No, it's not. It's sacrificed Saturn hardware. It came from like some system they gutted that they got cheap on Yahoo Auctions.
Yeah, nobody's manufacturing new Saturn boards.
Yeah, it's like they're not saving them from the trash either, because in many cases people are buying those Saturns that are listed as junk just to have a Saturn, because they know junk in Japan does not mean the same as what junk means here in the US.
Works.
But I mean, folks are manufacturing new FPGA solutions.
Right.
So Mars it's like projects coming out. So it's like, just use that. You know, I mean, now it's like we know that it's going to reach a point where it's like 1-to-1.
I would find this a lot more interesting if it was actually new hardware or clone hardware that they had made.
Right.
That would be a lot more interesting to me. But it's honestly kind of disgusting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, what I don't get is that they already cloned the Mister. Why not just get the Mister, like that whole thing, and then put that in there, and just wire that all in, and then you have a portable Mister. I'd buy that. So I want that.
You know what it probably is, Pat? It's probably because that would cost more than what they're doing. So they're probably buying a bunch of these junk Saturns on Yahoo Auctions for like $10-15 a piece in like these bulk like listings that you see sometimes, and just gutting them for this, and they can flip it for like $200.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the profit margins there are significantly higher than using like a Mister or something.
Yeah, because everything's already, all you have to do is just like do some soldering on the power supply.
And it's like when you look at these, it's like Nick mentioned this in his articles. He was talking to me about it, but it's like when you look at like the power supply pins in many of them, they're chopped off, so that means you can never put that back in the Saturn case and use with a proper power supply again, because there's no way to mount it. Or they've literally bent it, and they've done it so horribly. And it's like when you try and bend something like that, that's like soldered to the motherboard like that, the way that is, you put stress on the board, which like you could easily like crack a trace or damage the board by doing that. Just like, even though it's working now, you have no idea how much damage that's possibly done under the hood, and just what kind of ticking time bomb you're buying.
Exactly, because I remember seeing your thing, and I was like, that's a good point. What are they doing that power supply thing? Is that power supply going to blow up? Like, there's so many things, so I just don't understand. Like, I mean, I understand why they did it, but I don't understand, like, I don't know. It's just so weird to me.
The one that really, like, just disgusts me when I see it is the amount of VA15 revisions I'm seeing in these, which for those who don't know, VA15, that's the last revision of the Saturn. And that's the one it's easily seen because the two CPUs are merged into one chip.
Right.
And that came out in like late 1997, towards the end of 1997. And the last remaining Saturns were assembled in 98. Of those last remaining Saturns are all the Derby and skeleton Saturns.
Yeah.
And when you look at like the serial number analysis, it's like almost a 50-50 split of how many of like VA15 runs are standard white and which ones are those special edition Derby and skeleton Saturns. So there's honestly a pretty good chance some of these are coming from Derby and skeleton Saturns, and that's just disgusting.
Because my thing is, I'm thinking is that, like you were saying that with the revisions, that what I think might be happening is that they're buying in bulk, like we were talking about, and like maybe they like people, they sell it in bulk, and it's some guy that bought it and like, oh yeah, here's a bulk one. They don't know what they have, so they're taking the skeleton Saturn and like hawking it for this, and we honestly don't know where the rest of the parts are for it. Like, where's the cases?
A lot of people are like, oh, they probably are good enough to not do this with like working Saturns or special ones. It's like I hate to say it this way, but don't underestimate like the ability for a seller on AliExpress to not care about that and like just flip something priceless for a quick buck.
They might not even care about Saturn at all, like as a console.
Like there's these are honestly kind of people that would probably like shred a priceless painting to make filler to fill like a pillow or something to sell on there.
Yeah,
they shred. You have that Banksy got shredded, throw in a pillowcase.
Like, there were folks. There were, and I'm not naming names, but there were folks who were taking PAL games. They were taking like legit PAL games, even though some of them were sports games. I don't care. They were taking legit PAL games, shredding the covers off and making repros out of them. And it just made me want to cry because I was like, oh, like. The UK is not that big of a country. There weren't that many copies. Please stop ripping up PAL games to make repros.
It would be one thing if there were some of the, because I know like some PAL cases they just didn't hold up well. So if it was one that were like it literally had already fallen apart on its own, fine. But the ones where they were literally chemical. The one I think I know what you're talking about, where they were literally like chemical stripping them.
They were straight up ripping. They were taking like World Cup '98 or whatever, and just stripping the cardboard right off the front. Taking the glue off, and just like a huge pile of games that they picked up at the CEX, and we're making repros with it. And they're like, well, we're not fortunate to have replacement cases like you US guys. And I'm like,
so then okay, maybe just go out, do a European repro.
I say, do what the dude for the US one did. Like, go out and make them, be enterprising, make some money, And
like the other thing with it is like, European Saturn fans don't like those cases. Like they're terrible. They're truly awful. So it's like if you're gonna make a reproduction, like I wouldn't even like bother with that. Go for like the later DVD style ones.
I'm sure some enterprising individual could probably make like the definitive PAL SEGA Saturn case.
Yeah,
that, but has all the bells and whistles and closes properly and opens but the fall Trekkie's case, I think I'm with him. It's like the market's probably so small for that it's probably not even worth manufacturing because because I think a lot of Europeans really like the American cases as well. Like they prefer those ones.
So do you guys remember Do you guys remember this? Do you remember the site SEGA Saturn CO UK?
Yeah.
So years ago, like I remember I was like one of the first like American people on there, and when I like posted pictures of my collection, like, ooh, are those the American cases? I can tell because they don't look like they're made of wet paper and wood.
Right, yeah. Real quick, I think James. Oh yeah, James.
Let's hear James.
That was for everybody. That was Trekkies.
Trekkies.
Thank you, Trekkies. James, let's hear
it. To say about this?
Open up the chainsaw. Open up the clutch. Let's hear that. The rantings. Let's go. Sorry, I'm just trying to hype you up, man. I'm hyping you up. Let's go.
I think Trekkie's done a good job enough a vent there. I think most of what he said I'm kind of piggybacking off of, but like what he was saying about the auction sites, like what the Japanese list as junk, and the individual that we conversed with earlier, who's mentioned in Nick's article, he was, this kind of hyperbole that he was getting into, that, there's bins full of Saturns that are marked as junk waiting to go to landfill, and there's no damage to be done by doing this to them. And it's like, no, but as Trekkie said, junk on these auctions, all it means is either they haven't tested it, it's got like some scratches, it might be yellowed. Like as an example for like, you're talking about junk, Tom Thumb got me the twin sticks for Virtual On boxed, right? They were marked as junk, untested. They work absolutely fine. The only error or issue with it is one of the rubber feet on the bottom had come off and the plastic is a little bit yellowed, but the box is fantastic. The inside packaging is fantastic, and the thing works exactly. The pins on the controller connector are absolutely clean, no bends on them, nothing. And if you look at how much those go for on eBay, like from Western sellers, you're like well over £100 for that.
Yeah, you can get cheap in Japan. Like it's like what, like maybe £20 for like one of them.
It's like, it's just because, and someone came at me on Twitter earlier and said, well, you know, no one's buying these, so it doesn't matter. And I'm like, but just because no one's buying them doesn't mean that they've got the right to just, like, rip them apart. Like, what are they doing with the PSUs? What are they doing with the shells? Like Trekkie said, these are VA15 revisions. What are they doing with the This Is Cool shells? I know people that have bought replica This Is Cool shells because they can't afford the real This Is Cool console, and these bastards are throwing out perfectly good shells to make these abominations. Like, and even like, whenever I watched that video that Nick linked to, and he's like opening up the LCD screen, and I'm looking at it for the side, and the screen doesn't match the length of the bottom shell that the Saturn's poor motherboard is in, and they're not flush, and there's a gap, and the screen quality looks absolute dog shit, and the thing just screams jank and cheap and tacky. And again, the person that I was talking to earlier on came back and said, well, these are perfectly acceptable, you know, if all the person wants is a Saroo, and they put only wants a Saroo in capital letters. And I replied back saying, yeah, but if you only want a Saroo, buy a cheap Saturn, leave it be, and buy a Saroo. You're paying, as Nick says in the article, you're paying more to get less. Like, they are literally...
Thank you. You're right. You're paying more to get less.
Exactly. Yeah, and what they're doing is they're sabotaging them as well. The way that they're wiring the power supply, the way that they're blocking off the video CD slot, because they don't want you to use a satiator or to find a way to put a satiator in that. They want you to literally have access to slot that coin battery in that, you know,
the video card. Yeah, you can't do that.
You can't use the video card slot. They are purposefully like sabotaging these to make sure that you can only use it with a Saroo. So if your whole argument is that I only want a Saroo, just go on the auction sites or go on Facebook Marketplace or Gumtree in the UK, and you'll find people selling Saturns that maybe aren't reading disk drives or whatever. If you don't have any intention, you don't have any disc-based games, and you have no intention of building a collection, and you just want to get into the Saturn, and you want to go down the route of a Saroo, you're not comfortable opening up a Saturn. A Fenrir is very easy to install. It's 8 screws and 2 ribbon cables. It's a piece of piss, right? But some people aren't comfortable doing
if James can do it, anybody can do it. I'm just joking, James.
Mate, you're not wrong, by the way. Like, I ain't no Volta. Like, don't put a soldering iron in my hand. Like, it's like, you know.
He's gonna touch the metal bits.
I just want to add to this that
the other thing here is, like, when you factor in the cost of getting the Saroo card plus one of these at their full price, you could probably get a cheap Saturn and a satiator for close to that, especially if you're getting the LCD one. So, like, where's the logic in any of this?
And if you really, like, if the whole point of this purchase for you is that you want, like, a cool looking Saturn where you can see the motherboard, there are vendors out there who have made, like, replacement shells for Saturn. You could keep the black bottom and then get, like, a clear translucent top, you know, and there you go. You already have, like, one of the most beautiful game consoles of all time, in my opinion.
That's exactly what my friend Jason Madison did.
Yeah.
He bought a replica This Is Cool shell, and I kind of had a bit of a debate with him because he bought a Mark II white Saturn boxed, and this thing was whiter than white, like, it was beautiful, but he wanted the This Is Cool shell, so that's what he went out and bought a replica one of those, and he's got that white shell, and I'm like, mate, just put it back in the white shell, man. The white shell's pristine, it's pure white, just it's gorgeous, but he wanted the This Is Cool, so there's a very big difference between reshelling and what these guys are doing. Like, my Dreamcast is completely reshelled. I managed to get a black third-party one from a seller on eBay in Australia, and unlike the kind of Chinese AliExpress versions, the font on the lid badge is correct. It's Basileia. It's a correct font. The decal for Sega and compatible with Windows CE is on the front. So to the naked eye at a glance, it looks identical to the limited edition jet black Japanese Dreamcast. So it still looks like a Dreamcast. It operates like a Dreamcast. It's not as if I've took the motherboard and chopped it to bits and put it inside one of these Apple TV looking things that Dave showed me earlier. Although that doesn't actually chop anything up. That's just a different shell. But if you're just reshelling a third party like for like design, that's cool, that's fine. But these things, they just look so janky. And as I said on Twitter earlier, it's like it reminds me of the scene in RoboCop whenever they take everything away and all that's left is his face and the lungs. It's
like I would honestly I would have more respect for these if it was a thing where it was like they were buying up systems where yes, the case was like cracked and like damaged and like not usable, and they were just putting it in one of those replacement shells. I would have more respect for them if they were doing that. But they're not even doing that here. Because it's like I have no issue with like replacement shells. I think they look nice and they're pretty cool. And it's like my N64, like when I can find like one that I like, I'm probably going to replace the shell in it because the plastic on N64 cases, for some reason, it becomes brittle over time. So it's like the area around where the power supply goes, it's starting to crack and break apart. So it's like I'd like to get a new case for it at some point. And if I can find one where I can find a way to peel the serial number sticker off and put it on the replacement, I'll probably go for that. But it's like, so it's like the issue is like we're not against replacement cases. It's just this is not replacement cases. This is butchery.
Yeah,
it's the fact as well that people kind of reply back and say, you know, why are you getting so offended? And my reply to that is don't mistake passion for being offended. Like,
yeah, stop being so offended.
No. It's like, you know, it's you can be passionate about this, and people are saying, oh, you know, there's millions of consoles out there.
I'm bingo on hats.
In the grand scheme of things, like this isn't like
really
PlayStation level of exactly. It's not as if there's like millions and millions.
The most accurate number I think we have is 9.13 million Saturns in existence, roughly.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like of those, let's say 50% are still alive today because like let's say other ones were thrown in landfills over back in the 90s when like kids grew up and their parents just threw it in the trash.
Right.
So it's like, so let's say about 50% of them have survived. And now when we're looking at like US ones or PAL ones or some of the rare like variants like that, this is cool, or the skeleton ones or the high Saturn or the V Saturn, like you're starting to get into a very low number. So it's like,
I mean, how many were maybe just lost in floods, you know, or other
like
so I lost my
the tsunami, in 2014. How many?
Yeah, how many Saturns were lost in that
the tsunami?
That
oh my
tsunami?
God! I just realized something.
Right.
Imagine how many of them were radioactive if they're in Fukushima.
I mean, granted,
I just realized that.
More important than the Saturns, but still, it's like so. I just.
But you get what I'm saying? It's like think how many have just been lost to time. So it's like. Best case scenario, we would have like 9 million, but we don't have the best case scenario.
Right, we don't have the best case scenario. Yeah.
See, my worry as well. My worry as well, though, Trekkies, is that see these things, if they do take off in popularity, if they do sell, then the incentive is for these AliExpress guys to go out and keep doing it, and that's
right.
And that's why I think we've got to be vocal.
When you buy them, you're incentivizing them to keep doing it. The only way you make this stop is to not buy them. And that's just kind of like the key thing needs to be stressed here, where it's like you need to stress it's like this isn't a good deal. You're not getting a bargain here. You're being conned and ripped off.
Yeah, it's good that Pandemonium, wrote this. Thanks to Nick for writing it up to, try to like get that word out there, get that conversation started about how, pushing back on these AliExpress, chopped up Saturns,
because we're
letting
all
people know,
about
educating people.
We're educating them
why they're so bad.
A lot of times we talk about this stuff in the community and it just stays in our community and we're all kind of grumbling about it and we're upset, but it's like it needs to be talked about. Like at least people we can't control what people do. They're going to do what they want to do at the end of the day, but it's like we need to get this out there so that people at least know that there's some folks who are like really unhappy about this. And I mean and that folks at least have the opportunity to think about, oh, I never thought about that. We're basically taking a bunch of these Saturns that are and I really like what James said about hardware preservation. The thing is, I'm a huge hardware nerd and I care as much about the hardware as I do about the software. And I love my consoles. I love my Sega consoles, and I think like
Dave knows me though.
So like this will be kind of like my snobbish thing when it comes to console mods.
Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
My take on console mods is any modification done to a console, it should look like it belongs there. It should look like it was always there, and and like so like you can't tell like is this just some weird special edition that like they did years later that has HDMI or something like that? It should look like it was always there.
Right.
And that's why I liked it. That's what I used to differentiate like a good mod from a sloppy mod. And these definitely fall in the sloppy mod category.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think these are really reversible except with the more. I mean, technically you can't reverse it because you don't have the parts, but
you don't have the case.
And it's like not only that, it's like trying to fix that power supply pin bent. You'd almost have to completely remove them and solder new pins in. And it's like,
So
and again, we have no
that.
idea if they've damaged the board by bending them.
And don't forget, we're not against mods like we have like Fenrir and Rhea and Phoebe and Satiator and these things that are out. There is mods that you can do that, like you said, like in my Fenrir, I've got a kind of little plastic tray with the SD card just kind of slowly protruding from it, and I've actually got it printed in the Saturn blue to match the logo on the front of the box. So whenever you open my Saturn's lid up, you're greeted with this nice kind of Saturn blue little kind of tray with the SD card slot just sticking out. So I didn't just want to leave a gap that you could just reach into and like put an SD card in. I wanted to make it look like Trekkie said, like it's part of the design. You're doing your best to kind of make it blend in, but these aren't mods. These are just like Franken Saturns. They're just
right. So it's like for example, like my daily driver Saturn is the same one I've had since my dad brought it home in 1996. It has I've had a region switch installed in it since about probably 2002, 2003. So it's like I'm not against modding. My Sega CD has a region-free BIOS in it. I have like my Super Nintendo. I clipped out the things that prevent you from putting a Japanese cartridge in. I have a Famicom that has a composite video mod on it. So it's like I'm not against modding. It's just this is just really tacky, and it's not. Like a mod should bring something of value to the console. This doesn't bring anything of value to the console. It's just trying to make a quick buck.
Another thing that really grinds my gears is like when people completely disassemble a console like a Game Boy or Nintendo, and then they just like mount it up in a picture frame. It's like saying, I really love my friend. Look at them with all their limbs, just like on my wall. Why not actually like keep your friend working?
Well,
why not just actually play the console? Instead, it's like putting it up on the wall. Like this represents something to me. But
it's kind of like the one joke my one friend always makes about like sealed game collecting. He's like, oh yes, let's put it in an acrylic tomb for all eternity to never leave. He's like, and he's like, the joke's on them for the people who have the sealed Zelda carts when the battery explodes.
No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, no, some of those batteries are kind of not good. Like the Pokemon ones.
What are you doing, Pat?
What are you talking about?
Why are you under the desk?
Is he huffing helium?
No,
I don't know what he's doing.
I don't know. Give me a second. I fell on the floor. I melted. I can't get back up.
Are you okay?
No.
Anyway,
I fell on the floor.
I mean, obviously, some folks might feel like we're raining on their parade or something like that, or and it is what it is. Like we all. But I think it's obviously something that we're all kind of in agreement about, at least. So
one thing
it's definitely.
One thing I mentioned to Nick that would probably not be a bad idea to like do every now and then is like do like a stream where we're like, let's find some cheap Saturns. Just go on eBay, go on Yahoo Auctions, just find deals and be like, hey,
and then mash it with a hammer
Saturn,
afterwards.
Here's a deal for you.
I mean, if you want cheap Saturns, just hit up Sega Steve. Like he's got cheap Saturns.
He'll find you the cheap stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I've got Tom Thumb at this moment looking. He's watching an auction for me on that site he uses and gets his Japanese hauls from, and it's a Mark 1, very nice condition, unboxed Japanese Saturn with a controller and official memory card. No AV cable, but it's down as stained or scored. But it has been tested, so I believe the current price on that in yen before you add on kind of like the shipping and the seller's fee is, I think it's £19. So if I get that over the line tomorrow, I will be very happy.
Well, so there's one I got on Yahoo Auctions years ago. It was probably about, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago I got it, and it was a white Japanese Saturn. It had like 20 games with it. The Japanese version of the memory card. It had a steering wheel. It had like 3 controllers. It had a boxed light gun, and it was like pristine, perfect white Saturn boxed. It was listed as junk, untested, and I got it for like about $150 shipped.
Jeez, oh.
So it's like
crazy.
Those are the kind of deals you can get if you're patient and just know what to look for and know what you're doing, and just are willing to take the risk on buying something that a Japanese seller has listed as junk or untested.